30, my Amish wife was terrified after our wedding. I was too young to understand, came down for coffee. My name was written on the front in a careful, old-fashioned hand. Joseph Lapp. No street, no town, only my name, the way letters used to be handed across a fence line. I am 73 years old. I have not received a letter addressed that way in more than 40 years. I poured my coffee first. I sat at the table where Rebecca and I used to sit, and when I finally turned the envelope over, I saw the small pressed flower tucked inside the seal, a dried sprig of lavender, brown at the edges, and my hands started to shake the way they had not shaken since I was 19 years old, standing outside a closed bedroom door, listening to my wife cry into a pillow she had brought from her mother's house. I want to tell you what happened in the weeks after our wedding. I have carried it for 54 years. I think the lavender means it is time. We were married in November of 1971. I was 19. Rebecca was 18. In the district where I grew up, in the rolling country south of Millersburg, that was considered the proper age, perhaps even a little late for her. Our families had farmed within 4 miles of each other for 3 generations. I had known Rebecca since we were children at the same school, though I could not say I knew her well. She was the quiet one, the one who looked at the floor when the boys laughed too loud, the one whose mother always seemed to be standing just behind her shoulder. Our courtship lasted 11 months. By that I mean we sat together at 11 Sunday singings, and I drove her home in my courting buggy 7 times. We spoke about the weather, about her younger brothers, about the new colt my father had bought. We did not speak about ourselves. That was not how it was done where I grew up. Feelings were a private matter, a thing you carried inside your chest like a coal, not a thing you placed on the kitchen table for examination. I asked her to marry me on a Sunday in August. She said yes very quickly. I remember thinking she said yes the way a person agrees to carry a bucket, not gladly, not unwillingly, just because it was what needed to be done. I told myself she was shy. I told myself the joy would come later. It is strange to write that sentence now, in this present tense, sitting at this same table. I told myself the joy would come later. A boy of 19 does not know what he is asking when he assumes a woman's joy will arrive on its own schedule, like the mail. The wedding itself I will not describe at length. There were 300 people in my uncle's barn. There was celery on every table, as is our custom. Rebecca wore the blue dress her mother had sewn, and a white organdy cape and apron. She did not look at me during the vows. I thought she was being modest. The bishop spoke for 2 hours. We ate, we sang. By the time the last guest left, it was nearly midnight, and my new wife and I were given the upstairs bedroom in her parents' house, where we were expected to stay for the first few weeks of our marriage before moving to the small farm my father had set aside for us. That was the custom. The new wife stayed near her mother. The new husband learned the wife's family's ways. It was supposed to be a kindness. I climbed the stairs first. Rebecca followed me, holding a small kerosene lamp. When she stepped into the room and closed the door behind her, I turned to her and smiled the way a boy smiles when he believes he is about to begin his real life. And Rebecca, my wife of 6 hours, pressed her back against the closed door, slid down to the floor, and began to weep so quietly that if I had not been watching her, I would not have heard a sound. I want to stop the memory there for a moment and come back to this kitchen. The letter is still on the table. I have read it 3 times. It is from a woman named Hannah Yoder, who lives now in Indiana. She writes that she is 68 years old, that she was Rebecca's cousin on her mother's side, and that she has been carrying something since 1971 that she believes belongs to me. She apologizes for the lateness. She says her own husband died last spring, and that some things become unbearable to keep once there is no one left to keep them for. She would like to send me what she has, if I will allow it. She has enclosed the lavender as a sign, because Rebecca once told her I would understand what it meant. I do not understand what it means. That is the truth. And the not understanding is the same not understanding I carried into that upstairs bedroom in November of 1971 when my new wife slid down the door and I stood there in my wedding suit, holding my hat in both hands like a fool, and said the only thing a boy of 19 knows how to say in such a moment. Did I do something wrong? She shook her head. She did not look up. Are you sick? She shook her head again. I knelt down a few feet from her. I did not touch her. Something in the set of her shoulders told me not to. I asked her if she wanted her mother. She made a small sound at that. Not a word, more like a breath catching on a nail, and she shook her head a third time, harder. We sat on the floor for a long time. Eventually I stood, and I told her I would sleep in the chair by the window. I told her the bed was hers. I told her we did not have to do anything she did not want to do. I said it the way a boy says it, awkwardly, my voice catching in the wrong places. She nodded, still without looking at me. She crawled into the bed in her wedding dress and pulled the quilt up to her chin and turned her face to the wall. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the chair and watched the moon move across the floorboards, and I told myself that tomorrow she would be better, that she was only frightened of the newness of things, that her mother had perhaps told her something that had upset her, that I was a patient man, or at least I would learn to be one. I was 19. I did not yet know what patience costs when it is the wrong tool for the job. It is strange how a kitchen can hold 2 times at once. I am looking at the letter, and I am also looking at that upstairs bedroom, and I am also looking at the man I became in the years between. That man, my middle self you might call him, was not a kind man. I want to be honest about that before I go any further. I became hard. I became silent. I became a husband who provided and did not ask questions. Rebecca and I were married for 31 years before she passed, and I would tell you if you asked me last week that we had a quiet marriage, a respectful one, a marriage shaped by the early difficulty and never quite recovered. But last week, I had not yet read this letter. I had not yet seen the lavender. Let me return to the morning after. Rebecca rose before I did. When I opened my eyes, she was already dressed, her hair pinned, her covering in place, standing at the window with her back to me. I asked her how she had slept. She said, "Well, thank you." Those were her first words to me as a wife. "Well, thank you." As if I were a stranger who had asked after her health at a roadside stand. We went downstairs. Her mother had breakfast waiting. Her father read from the Bible. Her younger brothers stared at me with the open curiosity of children who have never had a new brother before. Rebecca ate 3 bites of egg and then folded her hands in her lap. Her mother watched her eat those 3 bites the way a hawk watches a field. When Rebecca set down her fork, her mother's eyes flicked to me and then back to her plate, and I understood, without having any language for what I understood, that something had passed between the 2 women that did not include me. That was the first warning. I did not recognize it as one. The days that followed took on a shape I can only describe now, with the hindsight of an old man. During the daylight hours, Rebecca was almost herself. She helped her mother in the kitchen. She laughed, quietly, at her brother's jokes. She walked with me to the barn once and showed me the new kittens in the hayloft. There was a moment there, I remember it because of the light, the way the November sun came through the cracks in the barn wall in long pale stripes, when she looked at me directly, for the first time since the wedding, and almost smiled. I felt my chest open. I thought, there she is. There is my wife. Then her mother called her from the porch, and the look closed up like a flower at dusk, and Rebecca went back to the house without finishing her sentence. The nights were different. Every night for the first 3 weeks, my wife wept herself to sleep. She did it quietly, with her face turned to the wall, the quilt pulled high. She did not want me to comfort her. The one time I reached across the bed to touch her shoulder, she flinched so violently that I drew my hand back as if I had been burned, and I never tried again. Not in 3 weeks. Not, if I am honest, in 3 years. I asked her once, around the end of the first week, what was wrong. I asked it badly. I asked it standing by the window, not looking at her, my voice rougher than I meant it to be, because I was 19 and frightened and beginning to suspect that I had done something terrible by marrying her without understanding her. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "It is not you, Joseph. Please believe that. It is not you." I asked her what it was then. She said, "I cannot tell you. I promised. I want you to understand something. In the community where I grew up, a wife did not keep promises that excluded her husband. That was the teaching. A woman left her father and mother and cleaved unto her husband, and there were no secrets between them but the secrets of God. For Rebecca to say the words I promised, on the 7th night of our marriage, with her face still turned to the wall, that should have been the moment I understood that something was very wrong. Something larger than shyness, larger than fear, larger than the ordinary difficulty of a young bride. I did not understand. I was angry instead. I said something I have regretted for 54 years. I said, "Then I cannot help you." And I rolled over and went to sleep. Or pretended to. This is where the letter on the table changes things. Hannah Yoder writes that Rebecca came to her in October of 1971, 1 month before the wedding. Rebecca was 17 at the time. Hannah was 12. They were close, the way cousins can be close when they live a quarter-mile apart. Hannah writes that Rebecca arrived at her family's kitchen door one evening with her eyes red and her hands cold, and she asked if Hannah would walk with her to the lavender bed at the edge of the garden. They sat there together for an hour. Rebecca picked sprigs of lavender and rubbed them between her fingers and said almost nothing. At the end of the hour, she told Hannah 3 things. First, that she did not want to marry me. Second, that her mother had told her she had no choice. And third, this is the part Hannah underlines twice in her letter, that there was a man in the district who had hurt her 2 summers before, when she was 15, and that her mother knew, and that her mother had decided the only way to keep the family's name from being spoken of was to marry Rebecca quickly to a young man of good reputation who would not ask questions. A young man of good reputation who would not ask questions. That was me. That is what I was chosen for. Not for love, not for partnership, for my quietness, for my willingness to accept what I was given. I have set the letter down. I have walked to the window. I have come back. I am writing this slowly, because the alternative is to not write it at all. The man who hurt Rebecca was, according to Hannah's letter, a married deacon in our district. He is dead now. He died in 1986. I attended his funeral. I helped carry his coffin. I remember Rebecca did not come to the burial. She said she was unwell. I did not press her. By 1986, I had learned not to press my wife on anything, because pressing produced only that quiet weeping I had first heard on our wedding night, and I had become a man who could not bear the sound. Hannah writes that Rebecca made her promise, that evening in the lavender bed, never to tell. Not me, not anyone. Rebecca said she would carry it herself. She said she would learn to be a good wife to Joseph Lapp, because Joseph Lapp was a kind boy and did not deserve to be married to a problem. Those are Rebecca's words, in Hannah's careful handwriting. A problem. My wife of 31 years described herself at the age of 17 as a problem. I have to stop again. I want to tell you what I did with the rest of those first weeks, knowing now what I did not know then. I want to tell you because I think the not knowing is the thing the title of this story names, and I owe it to Rebecca, and to the boy I was, to look at it directly. In the second week, I asked her mother if Rebecca had always been a sad child. Her mother said no. Rebecca had been a cheerful girl until she was about 15, and then she had grown quiet. Her mother said it the way you might describe a change in the weather, without curiosity, without grief, as if the quietness had simply arrived one summer and stayed. I remember her mother would not meet my eyes when she said it. I thought she was ashamed of her daughter. I understand now she was ashamed of herself. In the third week, I went to our bishop. I asked him, without using Rebecca's name, what a young husband should do when his wife was unhappy. The bishop was a good man by the standards of our district. He told me that a wife's happiness was the husband's responsibility before God, and that I should be patient and gentle and lead by example. He told me to pray. He told me that sometimes young women carried fears their husbands could not see, and that the cure was time and steadiness. He did not ask what Rebecca's fears might be. I did not tell him I had asked. I left his kitchen feeling that I had done my duty by going, and I went home and did not raise the subject with Rebecca again. That was my failure, not the not knowing, the not asking again. A boy of 19 can be forgiven for not understanding. A husband of 20, of 25, of 40, of 60, that man had chances I did not take. We moved to our own farm in December. Rebecca's weeping at night gradually stopped. I told myself, with the relief of a young man who does not want to look closely at his own marriage, that she had adjusted. The truth, I think now, is that she had simply learned to weep silently, or to weep when I was in the barn, or to push the grief so deep it no longer reached the surface where I could see it. We had 4 children over the next 10 years. She was a careful, attentive mother. She loved them in a way she could not love me, and I did not begrudge her that. I thought, in the small dark hours, that perhaps the children were what she had needed all along. I never asked her what had happened before our wedding. Not once in 31 years. I told myself it was respect. It was not respect. It was fear. I was afraid of the answer, and so I let her carry it alone. Rebecca died in the spring of 2002. Cancer. Quickly. She was 49. In her last week, she held my hand more than she had in all our years together. On the second to last day, she opened her eyes and looked at me. Directly. The way she had looked at me that morning in the hayloft with the November light coming through the cracks. And she said, "Joseph, you were kind to me. Thank you for not asking." I thought then that she was thanking me for a gift. I see now she was thanking me for a wound. The lavender on the table is from Hannah's own garden. She writes that Rebecca planted a row of it at our farm the first spring after we moved in, and that whenever Hannah visited, the two of them would sit beside it and not speak. Hannah writes that Rebecca told her, only once, that the lavender was for the version of herself who had sat in her mother's garden at 17 and decided to disappear into a marriage rather than say a true thing out loud. Hannah writes that she has kept a small jar of dried sprigs from that row, taken at Rebecca's funeral, and that she would like to send it to me along with a letter Rebecca wrote in 1999 and asked Hannah to deliver only when Hannah herself was ready. The letter from Rebecca is not yet in my hands. It is in Indiana. Hannah is waiting for my answer. I've been sitting at this table for 4 hours. The coffee is cold. The light is moved from the east window to the west. I am an old man, and I do not have many decisions left to make. But I have made this one. I will write to Hannah tonight. I will tell her yes. Send the letter. Send the lavender. Send all of it. I will read whatever Rebecca wanted me to read, and I will sit with it the way I should have sat with her. On that first night, on the floor of that upstairs bedroom, when she pressed her back against the door and wept, and I did not know, could not have known, was not allowed by my own youth to know, that the door she was pressing against was not the bedroom door at all. It was a door inside her, and she had been holding it shut alone since she was 15 years old. I understand now what I did not understand at 19. My wife was not terrified of me. She was terrified that I would find out, and she was terrified that I would not find out, and both of those terrors lived in the same body, in the same bed, beside a boy who thought patience was the same thing as love. It is not. I know that now. Patience without questions is only another kind of silence, and silence is what nearly broke her. And silence is what I gave her for 31 years because I did not have the courage to ask a second time. The lavender is on the table. The letter is on the table. The afternoon light is on the table. And somewhere in Indiana, in a drawer, in a woman's careful keeping, there is a page in my wife's handwriting that has been waiting 27 years for me to be old enough, at last, to read it. I will be ready by the time it arrives. I owe her that. I owe the boy I was that. I owe the girl in the lavender bed that. I will not look away again.